I remember the day we started running. Not walking, not migrating, like the elders call it, when they try to make it sound noble, but running, because the sky cracked with frost and the rivers stiffened into glass overnight. And suddenly, our world wasn't just cold, it was leaving us behind. It was my mother who said it first. "The land has stopped breathing," she whispered one morning while scraping frost from her lashes. And she was right. The fish disappeared, the herd scattered, and even the birds, those smug little messengers of seasons, stopped singing and just left. We weren't ready. Nobody is ever ready to outrun hunger. I was still chewing on a strip of dried caribou sinew when word came that we had no choice but to head east. East, where the snow met the sea. Except when we got there, the sea was gone. Or rather, it had frozen over solid as bone and just as cold. They called it the ice bridge. I didn't like the word bridge. It sounded like something that ended. But this thing, it stretched into forever, blinding white and whispering like it held secrets too old for us to know. There were 47 of us when we started crossing. That's not including the dogs or the spirits. My uncle said the spirits were coming too, following us because they didn't want to be trapped on the dying side of the world. He had frostbite on 3 fingers, so nobody took his theology too seriously. The wind on the ice wasn't wind, it was punishment. It got in your bones, turned your thoughts brittle. My cousin tried to laugh once, just once, and the sound froze in midair. I swear it shattered. Now I'm not saying we were the first to cross that bridge, but we sure felt like it. The elders tried to spin stories claiming we were part of something big, that we'd remember this for generations. But I mostly remembered the sound of my feet cracking the frost and the strange taste of old seal fat. We weren't marching. We were dragging ourselves. Sometimes the ice made these booming noises, deep and slow, like the earth was cracking its knuckles. Nobody wanted to be near the cracks. Even the bravest hunters stuck to the middle path where the ice was thickest. We didn't know how long it would hold. Historians still debate whether the Bering Land Bridge was always passable or if we just got lucky during a climate tantrum. I call it a tantrum because nothing that violent should be dignified with the word event. One night, during our 5th or 6th frozen camp, I remember looking up at the stars and wondering if they were following us too. They looked like tiny campfires in the sky mocking ours. Ours sputtered. Theirs didn't. That was also the night our firewood finally ran out. There are no trees on an ice bridge, no bushes, just the occasional frozen something sticking out of the snow, and you hope it's driftwood. One of the kids found a chunk of something and dragged it back, only for the firekeeper to inform us that it was mammoth dung. We burned it anyway. Desperate warmth doesn't ask for dignity. The food situation. Well, let's just say we stopped being picky. My father had this saying, "If it moves, we eat it. If it doesn't move, we lick it and hope." He was joking mostly, but it's amazing what you can convince yourself is edible when your stomach starts eating your memories. Speaking of strange diets, did you know that polar explorers much later would drink melted snow and get sick because it had too little mineral content? Like imagine dying of thirst while technically surrounded by water. That's the kind of cosmic joke we were living in. We kept moving. Sometimes we saw strange tracks alongside ours. Not wolf, not bear, not even human. Long claw marks, like someone was dragging an old tree stump, but it had a pattern. We stopped asking questions about those. It's easier that way. I think the worst part wasn't the cold or the hunger. It was the silence. Real silence. The kind that hums. You start hearing things in it, like breathing that isn't yours, or footsteps that pause when you do. The elders said it was the land talking to us, testing us. I said it was paranoia in a fur coat. By the third week, we'd lost 2 dogs and 1 person. The dogs we mourned. The man, well, let's just say he walked too far ahead during a blizzard, and the ice didn't hold. No one ever said it, but we all agreed that stopping to cry for him would have cost someone else their life. So we kept walking. One of the strangest things I remember was finding a carved stone half buried in the snow. Perfect circle, worn smooth, like someone had held it for years. Not ours. Not shaped like anything our people made. We passed it around in silence, then left it behind. There was no room for mystery in our packs. It wasn't all grim. Okay, it was mostly grim. But we had moments. Like when an elder named Suli made a joke about marrying a fish if we ever found one again. Or when a boy started singing nonsense songs to keep his sister awake. Little things that made you remember you were still a person, not just a shadow moving across white. Some nights, the sky came alive. Not just stars, but dancing lights. Green and purple, and swirling like some great beast had a secret and was trying to whisper it to us through the cold. Aurora Borealis, they call it now. Back then, we called it sky spirits playing. Honestly, I still like our version better, but even the lights didn't warm us, so we kept walking, kept breathing ice, kept hoping the bridge had another end, because the world behind us was shutting its doors and we didn't dare look back. Have you ever walked so long your memories start to bleed into the snow? That's what it felt like crossing that endless stretch we called the White Path. No trees, no hills, no end. Just white, above, below, inside your teeth, and the constant crunch of feet that forgot what solid ground felt like. The wind never stopped. It didn't blow like normal wind either. It hissed. It whispered things that made the dogs whimper. Some of the older women stuffed seal fur into their ears and claimed they could still hear voices asking questions we didn't want to answer. My uncle swore he heard someone laugh once. Not in a joyful way, more like in that you're not getting out of this kind of way. We walked in 2 lines, one for the strong, one for the slower folks. Kids stayed in the middle. The rest of us rotated guard duty. Not because we feared attack, but because when the cold gets in your head, your thoughts start trying to kill you. People ask, wasn't it just snow and ice? Sure. And space is just stars. But there were things out there. Tracks, sounds, shadows that didn't match anything we knew. One morning, we woke up to find half our firewood gone. No footprints, no marks, just missing. We blamed the wind like always. But I saw the look on the shaman's face. He wasn't buying it. One of the kids found a skull half buried near a crack in the ice. Not animal. Not quite human either. Big teeth. Tiny eye sockets. Smooth, like it had been polished by centuries of wind. We didn't tell the others. No need to make the cold worse with panic. Historically speaking, there's still debate about what kinds of megafauna coexisted with migrating humans. Saber-toothed cats, giant sloths, dire wolves. But what we found didn't fit the list. And the weird part, we saw it again. A second skull, then a third, all in a line, like they'd been placed that way. I don't want to make this sound like some monster movie. There were no jump scares, just unease, like walking into a house and knowing someone was just there, even though you're alone. That kind of feeling. And then came the day of the birds. We hadn't seen anything alive in days. No seals, no fish holes, not even the scrape of rabbit claws in the snow. But one morning, We woke up to a sky full of black wings. Not crows. Not anything we recognized. Silent birds. Dozens of them. Circling above us like we were dinner on slow legs. They didn't land. Didn't call out. Just followed us all morning. Some of the women threw stones. Nothing. One elder tried singing to them. They vanished by dusk. It was the only time I saw my father cross himself with both hands. I know it sounds like we were losing it. Maybe we were. Hunger does strange things. You start seeing warmth in things that don't move. You start imagining your future meals blinking at you. But we pressed on. One of the strangest things about the ice bridge is that it wasn't just ice. There were moments when the snow would part and you'd see the bones of the world below mudstone, even what looked like petrified wood. It made the elders whisper about a time when this had been real land. Not a bridge, not a crossing, but home to something or someone. That's the thing people forget. The Bering Land Bridge, or Beringia, wasn't just a strip of frozen water. It was a massive region over 1,000 miles wide at its peak. Some even think it had grass rivers, maybe even trees. But when we crossed it, just frozen teeth and broken sky. Odd fact for you. Ancient camel bones have been found in Alaska. Yeah, camels. North America once had camels before they moved into Asia and evolved into the ones we know today. I guess even camels didn't want to stick around this freezing mess. Our clan kept moving by routine. Wake, stumble, eat whatever didn't protest. Walk until the sun got bored and quit. Then repeat. That was life. We marked time by blizzards, not days. The third blizzard was the worst. We lost 2 more dogs. One man's hands turned black. My brother started speaking in riddles and laughing at things that weren't there. We nearly left him behind. Nearly. That night, I found myself walking ahead of the group. No real reason. Just needed space. That's when I saw it, a single set of tracks leading off the main path. Small, human-like, but the toes were too long, and no drag marks. Whoever or whatever made them wasn't heavy. I followed them for a bit before they disappeared under the snow like they'd been sucked down. I didn't tell anyone. What would I say? But I wasn't the only one seeing things. The shaman began drawing strange symbols in the snow during rests, spiral things with too many arms. Said they were warnings for things that don't need language. That's when I started sleeping with one eye open. Still, despite all that, we had our moments. My aunt managed to make a joke about marrying the wind if it kept pushing her from behind. My cousin dared my brother to lick the ice, and he did. His tongue froze to it and stayed there for 5 minutes. You don't know pain until you try to laugh silently with your hands over your mouth in a frozen wasteland. It wasn't all horror. Some nights, when the sky went clear and the air stopped biting, we'd lie down in silence and watch the stars move. They weren't just pretty. They gave us hope. If they could keep going, maybe we could too. The path stretched on. Some started calling it the ghost road. Others called it the line. But for me, it was the place where you stopped being who you were and started becoming whatever could survive. I didn't know where we were going. Just that whatever waited at the end had to be better than the nothing behind us. And so we walked. It started with a sound. Not loud, not sudden, just there. A low hum beneath the wind, like something buried too deep to speak clearly. At first I thought it was my own breath echoing off the ice. But when I stopped walking, the sound didn't. That's when I knew. We weren't alone. Don't get me wrong. We were always with people, with dogs, with our tired feet and bad jokes and elders who snored like mammoths. But this wasn't about that kind of company. This was something else. Something older. Something that didn't like being watched, but sure enjoyed watching us. My cousin called it the whisper. Said he started hearing it at night when the fire burned low and sleep turned slippery. I didn't believe him until the night I heard it too. You'd think the cold would mute everything. That sound would get swallowed up by snow. But no, it made the whispers clearer somehow, carried them. You could almost hear them bouncing off the frozen air, like pebbles skipping over a still lake. The whisper said nothing you could repeat, just feelings, warnings, regret. The elders said we were being tested. The shamans said we were being watched. And the hunters, well, they just sharpened their spears and looked over their shoulders more often. One evening, near what we believed was the halfway point, we stopped near a patch of ice that looked strange, not thinner, not cracked, just different. It had a ripple to it, like something had been swimming beneath and frozen mid-stroke. That night, 3 people said they heard singing. One said it was a woman, another said it was a child. The third wouldn't talk about it, just kept rubbing his ears like the sound was still trapped in them. I'm telling you, cold does weird things. But group hallucinations? That's a different level of scary. Historians still debate whether early migrants believed in spirits or simply used stories to explain natural phenomena. I say those historians never crossed an ice bridge with only a strip of dried seal fat and a half-dead fire for comfort. We started seeing shapes in the distance, always far off, always still, like upright boulders that didn't belong on ice. You'd blink and they'd vanish, or sometimes not vanish but shift ever so slightly between glances. The kind of shift that says, I'm choosing not to move fast because you're not worth the effort. I had dreams where the ice cracked open like a mouth, and something with too many teeth smiled up at me. I never told anyone about those dreams, but I stopped sleeping near the edges of camp. Let me tell you an odd fact. In some Arctic communities, they used to leave food out for the dead, just in case. A little something for the wandering souls. I thought that was sweet, until I woke up one morning to find that someone had done exactly that, left a small bundle of meat tied with sinew just outside camp. Nobody claimed it. Nobody touched it. We left it there. The dogs wouldn't go near it, not even the hungry ones. One of the younger boys disappeared for half a day. When he came back, he wouldn't speak, just stared ahead like he'd forgotten what words were for. His sister held his hand the rest of the day, whispering stories in his ear, like maybe she could push the old version of him back out. Sometimes survival means pretending you didn't see something. The ice beneath us began making different sounds. Not the usual moans and cracks. These were sharper, shorter, like tapping, like knuckles. The shaman said the land was waking up. I said the land should mind its business. We started moving faster, not because we wanted to, but because we felt like we had to. Our firewood was down to scraps. Our meat supply was jokes and bones. And people were starting to dream strange dreams, shared ones. My mother dreamed of a city beneath the ice. She said it was glowing full of voices, but no faces. My father dreamed of being dragged backwards by shadows with no hands. And me, I dreamed I never left, that we were still circling the same spot, again and again, like insects trapped in a frozen jar. One night, we made camp in a small depression, surrounded by half-frozen ridges. We thought it would block the wind. It did, but it also echoed. Everything echoed. Every footstep, every breath, every sniffle turned into a chorus of ghosts. That was the night we heard it clearly, singing, not words, not language, but pattern, rising, falling, soft, too soft, like it was coming from inside the ice. Some of the group stood. Some cried. One of the old women began humming along. We had to gently hold her down to keep her from walking toward the sound. That night nobody slept. The next morning, we found a pile of stones arranged in a circle just beyond the camp. Small ones, carefully stacked. No prints around them. Nothing to explain it. We didn't speak. We just packed up and moved. A few days later, the dogs started barking at a patch of snow like it had insulted their ancestors. We dug expecting maybe a buried carcass. Instead, we found bones. Too small for mammoth, too big for fox, arranged in a spiral. Again, no prints. We left them. You'd think the ice bridge would have made us feel isolated. But that was the thing it didn't. Not really. It felt inhabited. Not in the usual sense. More like we were walking through someone else's dream. And they were starting to notice us. Some people stopped talking altogether. Others started talking too much. One hunter named Revik began narrating his every move. I'm bending now. I'm eating. I'm seeing a light over there. We tried to laugh. But it wasn't funny. It was warning. I think the cold started peeling layers off us. Not just physical, but mental. We were becoming more primitive, more aware, more paranoid. Still, we moved forward. Because backward wasn't an option. And standing still, that was just volunteering to freeze into history. The whisper never left. It still hasn't. We found it just as the sky began bleeding orange, a skeleton rising out of the white like the bones of a god. Massive, majestic, frozen halfway into the earth as if it had died mid-fall and no one dared move it. A mammoth. Not just a carcass, but a cathedral. Its ribs arched above like the bones of a great tent. Its skull had caved in, maybe from age, maybe from battle. Either way, it was hollow now. And inside that hollow, we found shelter. You have no idea how sacred shelter becomes until you've been owned by the wind for 3 straight weeks. That day, for the first time in a long time, we felt less like prey and more like people again. We unpacked slowly, like entering someone else's home. The hunters checked for signs of predators. The dogs sniffed every corner. And the elders stood in silence, just staring at the great curved tusks, now crusted with ice and history. We built our fires under its ribs, not out of ceremony, out of necessity. The way the bones curved trapped the heat, creating a dome of fragile warmth. And for once, the wind couldn't find us. That night, we cooked the last of our smoked fish, turned it into soup, so the smell might trick our bellies into thinking there was more. We passed the pot around slowly, like a shared dream. The children began to laugh again. A few of the adults even tried singing off-key, tired but alive. Odd fact, ancient people often used animal bones, not just for tools, but for shelter and even ritual. Some archaeologists believe mammoth bone huts were common in Ice Age Eurasia. So maybe we weren't the first to crawl inside one and whisper thanks to the dead. That night, we told stories. Not the kind of stories with heroes and glory. The kind where the river dried up, where the bear got away, where your brother fell through thin ice, but you saved him by punching through it with your bare hands. The kind of stories that keep you human when the cold is trying to carve that out of you. One of the elders, Nala, told a tale about the mammoth itself, how it once carried a glacier on its back to keep it from crushing the stars. She said when it died, the stars cried so hard they froze into the northern lights. Was it true? Absolutely not. Did it help us sleep more than soup ever could? The younger ones gathered near the ribs, staring up as firelight danced shadows against bone. One girl traced her fingers along the grooves in the tusk and whispered, "It's like the world has a spine." That made me smile. But even inside the mammoth, we weren't safe from the cold's tricks. That night, two people claimed to hear footsteps circling the outside. Crunch, pause, crunch again. But when we looked, there was nothing. No tracks. Just wind piling snow in unsettling swirls. The shaman drew protective symbols on the bones. Said the spirit of the mammoth was restless, hungry, not angry, just lonely. We left a piece of dried meat near its skull. Better safe than sorry. Historians still debate whether the Bering migration happened in a single push or in waves across centuries. Looking back, I think we were just one ripple in a much bigger tide. But at the time, we felt like the last ones, the last stubborn spark in a dying world. By morning, the storm had arrived. Not snow, not wind, something heavier. A silence so thick you could feel it pressing on your teeth. The sky turned silver. The ground disappeared. The fire barely held. We didn't move that day, or the next. The third day, one of the boys tried to step outside and disappeared into the white within 3 steps. We tied ropes after that. There was something oddly peaceful about those days inside the bones. Like the world had paused, like we ducked into a forgotten fold of time. We talked more. We laughed even. One woman confessed she had stolen an extra seal ration, and nobody got mad. We were too full of soup and shared breath to care. I found myself staring at the same spot in the ribcage for hours. There was a crack there, a small one, barely visible. But through it, I could see a single star. Just one, flickering like it knew where we were. When the storm finally passed, we stepped outside slowly like newborns afraid of the light. The world looked different, flattened, scrubbed clean. No more strange tracks, no spiral bones, just white and quiet, and the line of our own footprints stretching back into the fog. We buried something before we left. A charm made of sinew and carved fish bone. We tied it around one of the mammoth's tusks, a gift, or maybe a bribe, in case it remembered us later. As we walked away, I kept looking back. The mammoth faded into the whiteness, then into memory. But I swear, just as we passed the final ridge, I saw something move inside its ribcage. Not big, not threatening, just there, watching us leave. It didn't follow. That night, under the open sky, someone asked the shaman what the spirit of the mammoth might do now that we'd left. He just shrugged and said, "Wait." The stars blinked overhead, and we kept going. You'd think, after surviving weeks of hunger, wind to burn, and something whispering under the ice, we'd be stronger together than ever. But people crack in different ways. And sometimes survival doesn't split us from nature, it splits us from each other. It started with Elder Maku. He'd always been respected wise, but full of stories and bad advice. The kind of guy who once tried to make snowshoes out of dried fish skins and nearly broke his ankle. But still, we loved him. Until he decided we were going the wrong way. "We're walking in circles," he muttered one morning while chewing a piece of frozen sinew like it had insulted his ancestors. "The stars don't match. The snow isn't right. We've been here before." He wasn't alone. A few others, mostly his old hunting buddies, nodded along. Claimed the winds were guiding us wrong, that the ice was leading us back to our death, that we had to cut across the flat stretch ahead. The stretch the rest of us had agreed was too thin. Our main route followed the higher ridges, safer, more solid, but slower. Maku wanted to cut across what looked like a frozen lake, flat white silent, beautifully dangerous. The kind of ice that sings just before it shatters. The argument wasn't loud, just tense, like a string being pulled between two teeth. Some people shuffled from foot to foot. Some stared at the dogs, waiting for them to decide. I didn't want to choose. I wanted the storm to decide for me. I wanted a mammoth to crash through and distract everyone. I wanted something else to split us. Not this. My mother stood with our path. My sister stood with Maku. And me. I stood between them. Sometimes, life gives you clear signs. Most times, it gives you frostbite and a choice between two bad directions. The group split at dawn. Maku's followers peeled off with a tight nod. 15 people. 2 sleds. 3 dogs. My sister didn't even say goodbye. She just looked at me once like I'd already let her down and followed the flat path into the glare. We kept to the ridges. Silence thickened. Even the wind didn't want to speak. That day, our own footsteps felt like betrayal. Historians still debate whether the Bering migrants moved in one wave or many splitting off into smaller tribes and subclans. Some say it was planned. Others say it was survival's ugly math. I say it was heartbreak, carved into snow. 2 days later, we saw smoke, not from our fires. Thin, low, rising far off toward the edge of the ice flat. We paused, counted heads, whispered names, and then kept walking. We didn't investigate. We weren't brave, just cautious. The next night, we heard a crack. Not thunder, not shifting ice. A crack. Sharp. Sudden. Followed by a distant scream that stopped before it got serious. The dogs growled. No one said a word. We walked faster after that. I don't know if Maku's group made it across. I hope they did. I hope they found warmer land, easier snow, better memories. But I also know the ice doesn't make promises, it makes echoes. We lost another elder that week. Not to the cold, to grief. He just sat down one morning, refused to move, and said, "I'll wait for the warmth." We left him wrapped in furs under a marker made of snow-packed stones. The path ahead grew narrower, the ridges tighter. One misstep, and you'd slide into a chasm that looked bottomless. One of our dogs did. It yelped once and was gone. The other dogs stopped barking for 2 days after that. You know what else happened? We found tracks again. Not ours. Human, but not fresh. Older. Shallower. Heading in the opposite direction. As if someone had walked across this bridge toward the world we'd just left behind. But no one said that out loud, because the idea that someone would return, that was madness. Or worse truth, we couldn't face. Odd fact. Some ancient cave art in Yukon Territory shows people with what look like snowshoes far earlier than they were supposedly invented. Maybe others came. Maybe they crossed, circled, returned, and were erased by storms we couldn't survive. We reached a frozen ridge that looked like it had once been a hill. At the top, we saw land, not ice, not snow. Dirt, dark, blessed, boring dirt. It was far. Still days away. But there it was. People began to weep. I didn't. I just stared at it, because part of me didn't believe it was real. What if it was another trick? Another mirage, painted on ice. The kind of false hope that cracked your chest open wider than the wind ever could. That night, I sat beside my mother as she mended a sleeve with bone needle and sinew thread. She looked at me and said, "Your sister will make it. If not to land, then to legend." I didn't respond. Legends don't hug you back. I dreamed of the mammoth again. This time it was standing, whole, alive, and it turned toward me with eyes full of stars and said, "Choose again." But in the dream, I couldn't move. And when I woke, the wind had changed, warmer, softer, almost kind. We walked on, toward the land, and away from the parts of us the ice had eaten. The first thing I noticed when we stepped onto land wasn't the warmth, it was the sound. Dirt makes noise. Did you know that? It crunches, it shifts, it settles beneath your boots in a way ice never does. After weeks of walking on silence, that gritty, squishy sound felt like music. I almost cried, just hearing my own feet grind into thawed earth. We didn't celebrate, we just collapsed. Laid down wherever the rocks weren't stabbing us, and the snow had melted just enough to form puddles. The dogs rolled in mud like they'd discovered religion. A few of the older folks kissed the dirt. I didn't blame them, but rest didn't last long. Because this land, this supposed salvation, it didn't feel empty. It felt watched. We weren't the first here. We could tell by the bones. They were everywhere, scattered like someone had tried to tidy them up, but got tired halfway through. Some were fresh stripped clean by scavengers. Others were old, gray, brittle, sun-bleached. Some animal, some questionable. I found a skull with a neat hole through the temple, like something had punched straight through. My mother said to leave it alone. I did, but I still think about it. One morning we found a row of stones, perfectly spaced, perfectly aligned, not natural and not recent, too weathered for that. Maybe a grave, maybe a warning. Either way, we moved around it. Our fires didn't burn the same here. The smoke curled strangely, always toward the same direction north. No matter where the wind blew, the shaman said that was the spirits telling us where to go. I said maybe the spirits should start carrying firewood if they wanted to give directions. He didn't laugh. That night, someone spotted eyes in the dark. Not human. Too low. Too many. They blinked, vanished, came back. The dogs whimpered. The children clung to us. Nobody slept. When dawn came, we found claw marks on a nearby log. Deep. Precise. Parallel. Not bare. Too narrow. Too knowing. Historians still debate whether early migrants encountered other hominids, Neanderthals, Denisovans, even unknown species. They say no solid evidence has been found. But if you ask me, bones don't always want to be found. Some stories bury themselves for a reason. We kept moving inland, following animal trails and riverbeds. That's when we saw the first structure. Not a hut, not a cave. Something in between. Rocks stacked in a dome covered in moss. A small entrance. Burn marks around the edges. We peeked in, empty, but someone or something had once lived there. There was even a carved bone flute still lying in the center like it had just been set down. We left it untouched. Later we found more. Stone rings, charcoal patches, a spiral carved into a tree. The land was full of signs. Not hostile, not friendly, just there. Like footprints from a party we weren't invited to. Odd fact, some scientists think ancient humans in the Americas may have followed a kelp highway, walking along the coasts instead of inland routes. If that's true, then maybe these stone signs weren't welcoming or warning. Maybe they were just leftovers from a different path entirely. One night, we caught something watching us. It wasn't trying to hide, just stood in the trees. Tall, broad-shouldered, head tilted like it was curious. I blinked, and it was gone. Some said it was a bear on hind legs. Some said it was a tree shadow. The shaman just nodded like he'd been expecting it. We called it the shadow. We never saw it clearly again, but its presence lingered, like the echo of a scream you didn't hear, but still flinch from. Despite the unease, we found better water. Game trails. A few brave hunters brought back rabbits and something that might have been a wild turkey. We started to breathe easier, a little. One of the children laughed so hard she snorted, and we all jumped. We'd forgotten what joy sounded like. We began building. Small shelters, fire pits, tools from bone and stone. It wasn't home, not yet, but it was something. Then we found the circle, stone again. Bigger this time, too perfect to be random. And in the center, a totem, not ours, A tall post, carved with faces. Not human faces too long, too sharp, but faces nonetheless. 8 of them, each facing a different direction, each wearing a different expression. Sorrow, anger, fear, laughter. That last one was the worst. Who laughs forever? We didn't touch it. We didn't sleep near it. And when we moved on, we didn't talk about it. That was the first night I dreamt of fire. Not warmth, not hearth fire. Burning. Whole forests alight. Screams muffled by smoke. The shadow walking through it untouched. I woke with ash in my mouth. The next morning our shaman left. No warning. No note. Just gone. His walking stick remained planted in the earth like a flag or a grave marker. We waited a day, then we moved on. There's this idea that the journey ends when you arrive. But that's not true. The journey just changes shape. Sometimes it turns into a question. Sometimes a haunting. We were here, alive, but we were not alone. We thought we were the first. That was the story we carried in our blood. Through storms and starvation, through silence and snow. That we were the brave ones, the pioneers, the ancestors of all to come. But this land had a memory longer than our footprints. It started with a cave, half hidden in a hillside, almost apologetic. The entrance was narrow, marked by a ring of stones, again too even to be nature's doing. Inside, the air smelled of ash and bone. Old smoke clung to the ceiling like a whisper, too shy to leave. We found drawings, painted in ochre and charcoal, herds of animals, rivers. A strange symbol repeated again and again, spirals inside hands, eyes with too many lashes, stick figures with heads shaped like suns. One image showed a group crossing ice, much like we had, but from the opposite direction. Someone had come before us, maybe long before. One of the hunters whispered, "Then where are they now?" We didn't answer. We lit a small fire at the mouth of the cave, not out of need, but respect. Something about that place demanded it. The flames crackled against stone, casting shadows on the figures painted there, making them dance. We slept nearby uneasy. That night, the dreams came heavy. Everyone had one, all different. One woman dreamt of drowning in snow, while being pulled downward by invisible hands. One man dreamt of endless forests full of eyes. A child dreamt of a giant made of roots who whispered stories in a language older than breath. Me, I dreamt of myself watching myself endlessly, layer after layer, until the final version turned and asked, "Why did you think you were alone?" I didn't sleep after that. We began finding more. A stone bowl filled with old pollen, a set of spearheads carved from translucent bone, a necklace made from teeth, human teeth smoothed and polished, worn thin from years of touch, each one older than us, each one placed not discarded. This wasn't abandoned land. It was layered, like we were walking on the skin of stories too thick to dig through. Historians still debate whether other groups crossed into the Americas long before the known Bering migration. Some point to coastal sites, others to buried tools or strange DNA traces in ancient remains. But in that moment, standing in the forest where trees leaned just slightly too far inward, I didn't need a textbook to tell me the truth. We were not the first, and maybe not the last, but definitely not alone. One afternoon, we followed the river down and found something so strange, we stood in a circle for nearly an hour, just breathing. It was a wall, not a big one, just a low structure made of stacked stones shaped into a crescent partially collapsed. But the stones were carved, not with symbols, with fingerprints, dozens, pressed into the rock, like the builders had left a part of themselves behind. One handprint looked small, child-sized. The old woman beside me whispered, "They wanted to be remembered." We stayed silent after that. The younger ones began asking if we should leave markers of our own. Stack stones. Carve something. Make noise in the silence to say we were here too. So we did. One night, under a clear sky, where stars blinked like tired gods, we built a ring of bones, not from death, but from leftovers. Fish spine, rabbit skull, bits of mammoth tusk we'd carried. We made a circle. In the center, we placed a carved tooth. A new story lay gently on top of the old ones. That night, the woods were quiet, but not empty. I saw something standing at the edge of the clearing. Tall, still, watching. Not threatening, just present. I didn't wake the others. Some mysteries feel less frightening when shared with no one. Odd fact, in certain indigenous oral traditions, there are tales of first people who lived underground or in the sky and disappeared before humans arrived. Some think these are metaphors. Some think they're warnings. I think they're memories. One morning, we found footprints near the river. Bare feet, human shape, but long toes, deep heel marks, stride too wide. They led into the woods and never came back. We didn't follow. Instead, we marked the spot with stones. Our way of saying we see you, we acknowledge you. We will not chase what doesn't want to be caught. We kept walking, found a clearing with soft moss where the sun hit just right and the wind didn't scream. It felt safe as anywhere had felt since we left the world behind. So we stopped. Not forever, just long enough to breathe and name things and let the dogs dig holes with reckless joy. Long enough to become more than survivors. We built shelters with bark and stone. We named the river. We sang again, not to silence it, but to be part of it. We laughed at bad jokes, cried for those we'd lost, and dared to imagine what a home could look like. Some of us still saw shadows in the trees, but now we nodded at them, shared the firelight when it stretched too far, because maybe the world wasn't ours to conquer. Maybe it was ours to remember, and to be remembered by. We were told it was a migration, but really, it was a reckoning. A passage not just across ice, but through fear, hunger, memory, and silence. We ran from a land that had stopped breathing, walked across a bridge that wasn't really a bridge at all, and stumbled into a world older and stranger than anything we could imagine. The journey took everything from us, then gave something back. Not comfort, not answers, just a deeper sense of presence, a raw understanding that we were never truly alone. Not on the ice, not under the stars, not even in the quiet forest where ancient watchers waited in the shadows. We crossed what some now call Beringia, but it wasn't geography to us. It was a living threshold, a test. It stripped us bare. It broke us apart. It forced us to listen to the land in ways most people never will. And at the end, we didn't find paradise. We found echoes of people before us, of people watching us, of people we'll never meet, but who left behind signs just like we did, hoping someone would remember. That's what this story really is, a remembering, a way of pressing our own fingerprints into the stone. So if you're still here, curled up, eyes half shut, maybe listening as the wind hushes against your window, I thank you for walking this path with me, for sitting beside the fire, even just in your mind, and hearing what the ice tried to whisper, because the land never forgets, and neither should we. Sleep well, dream kindly, and when you walk like someone might follow your footprints one day, wondering what stories you left behind.